Next, life safety items, capital improvement.
I'm going to turn the microphone over to Carrie Matlock from DLA. Carrie's here to present an update with Jason Green, our engineer, in regards to the soil borings, the MWRD meetings they had in regards to drainage, update on the Village of Brookfield meeting. I know we need to make a decision soon here on the track, and some new drawings that I showed you last month. Carrie's got some updates on that. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Carrie. And Joel, if you want to kind of sit up towards the front or be available in case you need to join in.
I think we'll start with the MWRD process that we've been through since last time we spoke. Jason, do you want to give an update of, and probably the local Brookfield meetings and stuff?
Sure. Yeah, MWRD meeting went well. Met with a group of 8 people from their office, which is the biggest meeting I've ever been to, and I've been to many of them. They had received letters of complaint from the neighborhood, by the way. Even their office had received some of those. Am I speaking into that clearly enough?
Yeah, just speak up a little louder,
Sure,
Jason.
Thank you.
Use your teaching voice.
There you go. So they considered our proposed design, and everything is very schematic at this point, but they agreed with our approach to the design in principle. The athletic field area will be grandfathered under the previous ordinance, which is a benefit to the project. Keeps it a little bit more economical, and it also will help to expedite the review because it's there's still a learning curve with the new ordinance, so it'll really help in that aspect as well. We approached them about a pump system to help dewater that area a little bit more, forcibly force the water out of that area while maintaining very close control over the flow rates so that we're not impeding or impacting the drainage in the neighborhood at the same time. So we would definitely be reducing the runoff rate from that area by at least 30%. Some portions might be more even.
Jason, what are you referring to, the runoff rate?
Oh,
from
I'm
what?
sorry. So rain lands, some water might soak into the grass, some might run off from a paved area. Synthetic turf has more of a runoff rate than natural grass would. So in order to control that, we detain or we hold some water on the site and slowly release it into the village storm sewer system. So we do that in a way that we're actually going to improve the drainage, even though we might be adding some pavement with the tennis courts, the new tennis courts. We're still going to improve the drainage and reduce the amount of water that runs off. Well,
So let me
reduce the flow.
Let me re-say it again to the camera so everybody knows this. The neighborhoods surrounding this construction project are not going to have increased flooding from this project and will not be impacted through flooding or drainage that they didn't have currently before. Am I right?
Correct. It'll be improved.
It'll be improved. So
Right.
it will be better than what they currently have right now.
Yes.
Okay.
There was a question from one of the board members asking, and Jason, you might need to go up and point.
Sure.
I don't know if Mary Ann has the laser pointer. Do you have the laser pointer available?
She always has that.
Do you?
So for camera, could you make sure that you're on the
You
screen
might
right
have to
there?
pull, there you go, it's working. So
They
the,
have it through the.
Oh, that's right, I'm
video.
sorry. They keep on saying that.
so the south east corner of the stadium,
They don't have that.
Southeast, this area here.
I know we had asked about, there was a connection for the MWRD, a major, and we had asked about, one of our board members had asked about tapping right into that with our drainage.
Could you explain a little bit what the benefit is that we are able to grandfather into the old ordinance?
Sure.
I'm not
Let me-
quite,
Let me give Marion one thing.
It's on that jump drive area, sorry.
Is that not?
Well, she's looking for that, I can answer your question.
Okay.
If you close out of here and go, I can find it.
The,
Grandfather.
yeah, the
benefit.
previous ordinance does not require stormwater detention in combined sewer areas, which is what this site is located in. So it means that the sewage and the stormwater runoff, rain, go into one pipe, which goes through the street. They aren't separated into two pipes. Under the previous ordinance, MWD didn't have any requirement to detain and attenuate that flow rate off-site. So basically, it wasn't required, but under the new ordinance, you would have to provide detention. So large vaults, providing a lot of storage for that runoff from the rains, and then slowly release it. And not only that, but the rules are even upped, so they're even more strict than they used to be for separate sewer areas, for non-combined sewer. So following the previous ordinance really allows us to keep this more economical, while still reducing the flow rates.
What do you have up here, Jason?
So the north is to the left here, to the right.
Yeah, it's tilted.
Yeah, but
Right.
you can see the. There you go. Okay. So here's the athletic field area. Here's golf. Here is Washington. And you can see the storm sewer. I believe that Dr. Keenan had asked last time what the storm sewer network for the whole area depicted. The storm sewer in Gulf goes up north to Fullerton, Rockefeller, sorry. Goes west down Rockefeller, goes to, was it Arden? And at Arden, the blue pipe that you might see there goes to the north, and then comes back down, the red pipe that you see, comes back down south to Washington, and then that flows east down Washington, eventually across First Avenue to the Des Plaines River. So the question was, could we possibly tie in the athletic field area directly to Washington, the red pipe that you see here, rather than the blue pipe, which goes north on Gulf? Makes a lot of sense from a lot of ways. One way is that if we could remove that water from the blue pipe, it would mean less water that flows through all of this network, which it could lead to, increased flooding concerns along that area. So that was one thing that we approached the MWRD with, was the possibility of doing that. They wouldn't allow it because of a storm sewer overflow location here that goes to the Salt Creek. So we have to still connect to Gulf and have our flow go in that direction, unfortunately. However, we're still reducing the flow by at least 30% from the athletic field area, so we will definitely improve the drainage. We were just hoping for even more of an impact, more of a benefit from the design.
So the water goes all the way down and comes all the way back to pass it, so.
Yes.
If it's not raining, it comes back.
Right,
But if it's raining, it goes in the creek.
yes. Something called a combined sewer overflow at this location. So it's a large pipe, but they have a restrictor over it so that only if it was not raining, the flows would go through that restrictor and would come all the way back down. If it's raining and those sewers are surcharged, then it overflows and goes to the Salt Creek.
Is that body of water by Salt Creek?
Is it?
It's in the zoo.
It's in the zoo.
It's a zoo lake. It's a zoo lake. Okay.
Okay, so that was the sewer, MWRD.
So the water from the football field could go about a block and a half to the Spring River, but instead has to go about a mile through a myriad of pipes to get to the Des Plaines River, in essence, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, it's only an overflow there though, too, right?
It's an overflow
not-
into the Des Plaines.
Doesn't necessarily go into the Des Plaines River, right?
Correct, well, right, there's overflows at both locations. It's just that we don't want to move a lot of water from one spot
Right.
to another water body. So then people downstream in the Salt Creek will
Okay.
benefit, people downstream on the Des Plaines.
Okay.
So
Is
that
that-
meeting went well, and despite, all that, it still did go well. And then we consequently met with Brookfield to discuss.
Can I go back?
Yeah, let's answer any questions on MWRD.
Now, Jason, in your professional opinion as an engineer, is that reasonable? Is there any other alternative, or, I mean, I'm just thinking about reducing flooding, if we can, for our Hollywood friends. Is there any other alternative that, and is it logical what they said?
It is logical. I follow their logic. They had 8 people in the room. 2 of them were actually combined sewer overflow experts. And they said, no, we cannot do that because somebody south on Des Plaines River will, get a 1/8 of an inch more flooding there because of doing something like this instead of going to the Salt Creek, so.
The bottom line is, they assured you it would be 30% better than it is now.
It's going this way, the way they want us to do.
Yeah, well, we would do that anyway.
Yeah.
I would do that anyway. If it was connected to the other direction, I still would provide the 30%.
I think you said yes to a question that's, you meant not to say yes to. The MWRD didn't determine this would be 30% better. You determined with your design on what we're doing on our property.
Yes.
That it's gonna be 30% better, right?
Yes, right.
Okay. But you still really gonna have to come back to it again. So if Matt keeps saying people agree, you haven't said why it's gonna be 30% better. You basically said it's going, so far what you described is exactly the way it is now, right?
No.
The drainage.
The part you described, Carrie, is where the water's going to go
Yeah,
is
we-
unchanged.
Correct, we can't really control what the
Right.
city infrastructure is.
Right.
That's correct.
So
I think his question
you
was, what
haven't
are you-
described why it's gonna be 30% better
Right.
yet. Not at this meeting, anyway.
That's true.
So, in order to, can I get into that?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, I want you to.
So, again, the storm sewer system, or the combined sewer system, goes north on Gulf, west on Rockefeller. We really have the synthetic turf field, which has a lot of gravel beneath it. The base material is all gravel material that it drains really well, which means it's got a lot of openings between the rocks. So that volume, we really want to utilize as our detention, as at least a portion of our detention volume, so that we can hold water in there temporarily below the surface of the carpet itself. And that would help us store water there for time before we can release it into the storm sewer system. And that will give us volume without really spending a lot of money at all, really, like real construction dollars, because we can just utilize the gravel that's there. In addition, we may have to provide something underground in this area, either under the parking lot or the tennis courts or in the long jump area. There's different systems, vaults or oversized pipes, a number of things, another number of tools that we can use to provide some extra volume there, so that also together provides enough storage volume, storage of runoff, stormwater runoff, that we can hold until the peak of the rain event passes, and then we can be releasing water afterwards when it's not adding to the problem, or not adding to the crest of the other runoffs from the area. So a combination of the two, really.
I thought there was going to be, are we still considering, I thought something towards the lower southeast corner. Again, we were gonna have a larger drain pipe, so that would fill first, like a check valve system. That would fill first before it would spill out the sewer line, correct? Are we still doing that?
Yes, it's probably not, it won't add up to a lot of extra, but whatever we can do there. Basically, just like the synthetic turf field has a lot of volume in the voids between the stones, we would do the same thing in this area with, we'd use a special stone that's larger, but it has larger spaces too between them, so we could store some volume there. And that would be the logical location for the pump, so that we could forcibly pump water out of the synthetic turf base into that gravel-filled pit, and then water could infiltrate through and store inside the voids of the larger rocks, and then overflow
So currently,
out to the street.
right now on the football field, we don't have that, right? Do we have any drainage underneath the retention?
There is not. There are two drains in this area, in the low area, two manhole lids. They
So
might
that's
look
what
like-
causes the blow up, right? The flooding and the island, the lakes.
What happens now is there's some water underneath the field always. And only when it rises up to a certain level does it overflow in those two structures that are located right down in this area. So there's two structures. It comes up out of one, it goes 10 feet, and it goes back into the other one, and then there's a pipe that connects into the street. So.
But that area usually floods pretty fast.
It's
We get a
low.
lot- We get a lot of standing water over there.
Yeah.
It's low, and the water pretty much fills up to almost that rim. It's not really infiltrating really well because it's hard clays. So water kind of sits there. It might evaporate quicker than it infiltrates. And then, so the first drop of rain, in effect, comes through and bubbles up and goes on its way. So that's the first area you'll see water come.
Do the drain tiles feed to that spot?
Yes.
So right now, the football field, when it gets water on it, if it gets too much water, the water crosses the track into that corner and down a manhole?
So, in the worst case, but most of the flow is underground through pipes and gravel that allows drainage.
So why is our field floating?
Yeah, what do we have at islands?
The what happens is the sewer in the street backs up, floods, it fills up and gets inundated, and then water, even if it does go through that low rim and over to the other one, it has no place to go because the water in the street is high. So the water just kind of seeks its level,
Fills back
fills
under the
and
turf.
flows back up. So that's the reason for the pump. The pump system can forcibly push water out from that area so that the synthetic turf field can stay dry for the most part and force water out of that area.
Okay.
Here's a thought. What happens when there's a power failure?
There's backups, right?
We could do backup generators. I don't know if we can afford it, but maybe be an alternate. Worst case scenario, if it didn't, if the power did fail and the pumps weren't working, we also think that we will raise the field elevation somewhat, 4 to 6 inches. So that's just a little bit more insurance that it's not going to get, the
So it
water
can
level
come
won't
back.
get up to the perfect level.
Okay.
So
Any
if the
other-
sewers are backing up and you're pumping, where's it pumping to?
Into the sewer.
But
So,
this-
but because you're pumping it, it's forcing it in that direction. So it's not going to be subject to the same condition as it is now, where the water seeks its level and backs up into the field, because we're gonna be forcibly pushing water.
And so you're able to
out.
force it through all the way to the Salt Creek area? Or is it gonna force it out of sewers down the road?
It'll force it to sewers right here.
So
What he means
is golf gonna
when you
flood
pump-
then?
When you pump it into the pipe and push the water forward, is it gonna come up manholes
That's
in
what
the
I'm asking.
neighborhood? Or is it gonna make it all the way to the Salt Creek on an overflow?
Right. We've already also, we're looking at raising the grade around it, almost to make a little New Orleans.
Okay, the question I'm asking is, then, again, I'll ask.
Yeah.
There's only a certain amount that those sized drain to, pipes, sewers are gonna be able to push. You're gonna push it through. That thing follows through on streets. It's gonna force water up the sewers, the manhole covers, by forcing it through.
Because we're reducing the flow rate, it'll be better. It'll be 30% better than it was. So we'll still be pushing water to the sewers in the street.
You're,
Okay.
you're not, your explanation is not sinking, so either
Okay.
you have to let me finish, Carrie, please. Your explanation. Yes, 3 people asked the same question. Apparently, one of the reasons we flood is the water was coming from the sewer in the street and pushing onto our property, because it took the path of least resistance, right? So now, you're saying we're gonna reduce 30%, but you're also saying we're gonna force water off of our property into a sewer that used to force water onto our property. So we were taking water from the neighborhood and our property was flooding. And what we're trying to find out is, I keep hearing this 30%, but it sounds like we're gonna force water into a sewer system that was using us as their detention pond. And by doing that, is there gonna be more water forced into that sewer line that's gonna flood between here and that check valve or whatever you call it, that overflow line in Salt Creek?
Because of the volume that we're going to provide, that'll let us store more water, the pump rate will actually be small. The rate that we'll be pumping water out will be smaller than the existing rate. So,
But stop, just
Yeah,
stop
okay.
there. You explained already that it was being forced onto our property. We're not, at least I'm not, I can understand there's less being going off.
Okay.
That concept I understand. What I don't understand is if it was actually coming onto our property, and even though there's less than what could have happened coming off, in an extreme flood situation, aren't we forcing more water into the line than what was happening before, even though we're designing this on a normal case to be 30% less than before?
My answer is no, because we're taking on more water on the site that we're holding.
So we're actually making ourselves a bigger retention pond, is what you're saying?
yes, larger volume.
Okay, so as opposed to coming up, you're saying we're gonna have, with building up the field higher, putting more gravel underneath it, you're saying we're gonna increase the capacity as a retention pond?
Yes.
And as
That
opposed to
and-
staying above ground, it's gonna go underneath. And even if the sewers back up, it's you're saying we're continuing as a retention pond for that sewer system.
But I think the sewer may not have the ability to water come onto our property. With the pump, it might be a one-way.
Well, there's one way or the other. Right now, the sewers are backing up onto our property.
Because-
Either
right.
we're gonna continue taking that on, or else we're then directing the water the other way and forcing it through the sewer system that we already know can't handle.
You have a valve and you don't pump. That means water can't come on your property, but you're not pushing water out.
Then where's that water gonna go that's in that sewer system?
And the more underground,
In the larger underground detention.
the larger underground detention we're putting in.
I want to clarify, can we clarify that?
Yeah, please.
So, right now you're saying, we're getting water, say from Gulf,
Yes.
going onto our field. That's basically why it floods. It's not flooding from our rain or our square footage, we're getting backed up. So, our system will basically prevent our field from acting as the retention pond for the stuff that's going there now.
In effect, yes.
Okay, so that stuff, we've assumed a problem really that shouldn't be ours. So we're going to stop that. Plus, we're going to get more storage underneath to handle what theoretically is our responsibility.
Right, which is
Yes.
which means there's less water from our responsibility being pushed into that sewer line.
So how about, does the water district, they understand the fact that we're going to stop that from, they will no longer have us as the sump, and it's just going to layer on Gulf Road? They're happy with that?
Both entities, we've discussed the conceptual stormwater layout with both entities, the MWD and the village engineer. They haven't agreed to it yet, but they've agreed to consider it in concept and review. They want to see full plans and calculation packets
Which is next.
in order to approve it. But but we've had the conversation, the concept.
So
With
that-
with the additional parking and the tennis courts, the volume of the natural green space that would normally seep in has decreased. Are you then gonna have those higher and it's gonna slope towards that southeast corner?
He said he's gonna put
Put
retention.
stuff underneath it. We have to
Yeah,
put
now where is it
some-
gonna drain through? Is it gonna go up to,
Most likely, I think that the Rockefeller would be the high point here, the parking lot would be a little bit lower, and then the tennis courts would be a little bit lower than that. And probably that would be similar elevation to the synthetic turf field, relatively.
Are we able to tap root into the sewer line on that Rockefeller that's coming back across?
That is our goal at this point, is to tie in at this point. So
For
we
that
can
section.
improve, at least, because the MWD is not forsaken us to connect at this spot. That way, at least we can reduce the amount of water that's going into this pipe from here to here. It's not as good as going into Washington at this spot, but we're improving at least golf and a portion of rock.
So to answer Mr. Gritchen's question, we're not pumping it all the way across the field to come back around. We're pumping it straight to the tennis courts, and will be pumped to the sewer line on Rockefeller.
But we have detention there
Right.
to hold rainwater for a while, which we didn't have before.
Yes, right.
And just to clarify, the pumping out of the water from the retention, is that a one-way,
Yes.
so the water won't be coming back?
So it'll act like a check valve in and of itself.
And then also building on what Gary said too is, as I'm pumping in, not a lot, but I am pumping some water into that sewer line going down Gulf, that the natural pressure-wise would, if it was too much, would go to that overflow blow valve over in Salt Creek, right? So it would seek the path of least resistance, which would open up the Salt Creek to be able to suck out that.
Yes.
Okay. And that would happen anyway right now. That would happen anyway right now. If it got too big of rain, it would do that already.
Yes, and
Okay.
more so.
So our field is flooding now because the water is moving backwards.
Yes, backflowing from golf in.
And the water that's backflowing is from the neighborhood?
Yes.
Do we take anything on from the zoo?
yeah, from the parking lot?
Some of it, yeah, in this area. There's, at some point, water actually goes to the north, but at least from a portion of the large parking lot.
Goes into this pipe
Comes south.
onto Rockefeller pipe.
Rockefeller, yeah.
And then, under current conditions, if it's too much, it would reverse course to the football field.
Yes, yeah, there would be, even if the drop of water that comes here might not go all the way back, it's gonna cause, in effect,
Right.
other waters that are coming from upstream to move in that direction.
So our field, I guess Matt asked the question, or someone asked the question, our field wasn't flooding from the rain. Our field was flooding from the movement in reverse direction
Yes.
of the drainage of the neighborhood, which includes RB, the zoo, and the neighborhood.
Yes.
Was reversing course and seeking the path of least resistance and coming onto the football field, causing the football field to flood, and that's where we see the bubbling of the field.
Yes,
And our two projects, underground, underneath the parking lot, tennis court area, and in the southeast corner, we're thinking about putting in these retentions and hiring the field, raising the field up will cause us to retain some more water. And to the best of our ability, if that's all captured, we would pump it out at a later time when there wasn't so much pressure on the flow of the drainage. And at the same time, both of those things would have valves where it wouldn't backflow into our property.
yes.
Okay,
Isn't he, good? He's an engineer.
Is
Very
that,
good, Mike. Very
is
good.
that, is that okay?
I just got, John, before you answer your question, I just want to make, and we've had a lot of concern about tennis courts where the parking spaces are now on the picture and the grass field. But those tennis courts were built over 30 years ago. So from the prints you've looked at and from what you've seen, there's no storm besides the general sewer that flows right out to the street.
Yes.
So this is gonna, so although the initial perspective from residents would be you're hurting flood control, this is going to be helping. Because right now when the grass field gets saturated, that water runs off to the street or to wherever it can find its lowest point.
Yes.
Or now by moving the tennis courts there and putting retention underneath it, digging up the tennis courts and repaving it and putting retention underneath that, we're actually gonna be increasing the retention of water compared to what they think they have already.
Yes.
We're lowering the impact of rainwater in that section
Yes.
currently there that would happen with a heavy to impact the other neighbors.
Correct. And that soil, it really is a pretty hard clay that really doesn't infiltrate very much anyway. I mean, I'm not even factoring that into the 30% reduction, but, you know, in effect, really, it has a pretty good runoff from that clay.
So I hope that people are watching, seeing how we're doing this to make sure that we are, you know, really watching and controlling our own rainwater, so.
So,
All right.
Wait, I'm not done.
Okay.
So the clay underneath the gravel right now, that's pretty
In the turf
impermeable?
field
Right.
area.
So water's basically just sitting on top of that clay, percolating up into the gravel.
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you this. The sanitary district, or whatever it's called now,
WRD.
they approved this plan in 2006.
Mhm.
Should they have, well, I don't know if I want to use this.
No, I don't.
Does that make any sense to have, should they have known that our field, which we paid a lot of money for, was basically,
I don't know if I would answer that, because you weren't here when
Yeah,
I did
is
it.
your,
You were not here when I did it, yeah, that was
but,
a different project.
no, but I mean, if there's an engineering issue here,
I
mean,
just,
Did we hire somebody?
why, shouldn't someone have known that it's gonna go back under and saturate our field? I'm not saying us or our engineer, but the MWRD approved this. I mean, I've seen it myself. Why would they approve that? We didn't build this field to be a sump. So what do you think happened?
oh. That's a loaded question.
From an engineering standpoint.
Yeah.
Well, I think from a non-engineering standpoint, that they didn't account for it. That whatever they did in this project didn't say, okay, what if we get a lot of rain, where's it gonna go?
I don't think that they realize the impact of the backflow of rainwater coming off the area back into the field. But I'm not the engineer on it, neither was
Yeah.
our engineer here part of it, but
Well, I'm asking MWRD why they gave us the permit when they said everything's
Well, there's no
fine.
one from
We're not sure if it was
WRD
designed as
here.
built as designed either. There could have been different drawings.
Well, then you're putting the blame.
I'm not sure.
She's
I'm
not
not
sure.
sure what.
Okay, right.
We gotta talk about our project.
yes,
Yeah.
we're focusing on our project right here.
Well,
right
this
now.
basically, you know, people need to know what happened here, so we have, you know,
We're definitely correcting some issues that might have been overlooked.
right, because I don't want to, you know, people can say, well, look, the current status is you guys are a sump, now you're stuck being a sump. I mean, I don't want to be stuck being a sump.
Sure.
Jerry, I got a
You know what I'm
question
saying?
about.
Well, you know what, maybe you can answer the question a different way without pointing fingers. First of all, the change the design with this construction wouldn't have had a very big impact on drainage on an analysis basis, because you were just replacing grass with turf and would put a minor addition on a building there, where now you have to do an analysis because you're covering some more green space. The other thing is, I presume, since you say there was heavy clay there probably was heavy clay under our football field before they did it, right? So the would work in the opposite direction, right? But the clay would keep the water from being, by making that more permeable, it allowed the storm water to force back up into our field. That probably wasn't happening with the natural clay that was under our grass that used to be there.
It certainly wouldn't rise the grass.
No, it wouldn't make the
I
grass
agree with
rise.
that.
But it didn't flood, it didn't flood, the grass didn't flood.
But
like
I don't
it
know
does.
how high that grass was compared to what the turf level was.
I think it might have been higher.
That's,
Yeah,
that's very
I thi-
typical.
I think the turf was higher.
It has to be crown
The
shaped.
natural grass turf.
was higher.
Was higher.
From my perspective, I
I remember it was higher.
Well, detention was not required when they did the, when they did the field
So
project.
Carrie, let me ask you a question. If you're gonna take where the football field is right now and put in a better retention sub-base, is there any issues with it, sinkage or anything like that causing the field to be uneven?
Yeah, that brings us into the soil boring report, which we can talk about why, we're also another reason why we're adding another, like, up to 4 inches of gravel throughout the area, which I can go to talk about if we're okay.
Yeah, and then we'll lead right into this. So is there gonna be a easily interpretable, like ratio? So we're saying we're taking away the green space, and there is a kind of a drainage factor based on the soil, heavy clay of X percent, and that would typically have a ratio of whatever, 3 inches per minute drainage. We're gonna come in and put sewers underneath it, that's gonna take away X amount per minute. So that some way the neighborhood could understand that right now, even that green space is not a great retention area, and it only holds X amount of capacity, and we're gonna bring in Y plus capacity underneath the additional amount of asphalt and cement that we're putting down. Is there gonna be some logical thing that we can communicate?
Sure, I'm thinking maybe something graphic
That would be good.
would be
We would
probably
like to
the
see
best
that.
way to
Yeah.
describe it, explain it.
Okay.
One other thing before you get off of this, you didn't estimate all this cost in your preliminary estimate of this project.
I had budgeted some allowance for detention, stormwater
So
detention.
we won't expect to see a significant increase with the final design.
You know, Jason and I have talked in ballpark figures for what we're, again,
Like
this
two
is.
pumping systems, for instance.
This hasn't, the pumps are actually not the bad part, it's the stormwater retention, that's the significant dollar amounts. But we did include a budget line item for it,
Okay.
and I think in our conversations, we're kind of on target with that, so. It shouldn't be way out of whack as
Okay,
far as,
so-
unless there's some other requirements that, we're not aware of at this point in time, and it's not, and they make changes to what we've been discussing preliminarily.
Okay.
Okay, I think there's been a good discussion on this, and I hope that people who watch this meeting see what we're doing with this. Let's go to soil borings next.
Sure, so we got the results, preliminary results of the soil borings, and mostly with the track and field, the soil technician was concerned that due to the way that the existing base is and the water saturation, that when throughout the course of construction to replace the synthetic turf and to do the track resurfacing and any other improvements on that site, they're gonna have to drive construction vehicles on top of that area, which when we're having our conversations with the construction managers, they pretty much validated that concept. So we want to be prepared to remediate any kind of drainage that we might ruin underneath the football field. And throughout our conversation, so we almost led to the conversation of, well, we might have to take out all of the gravel that's beneath the football field and just redo it at this point. But Jason came up with an idea of putting down a geogrid system, which is just like a fabric and stone that would overlay over the track and the field. Now, the track, on the other hand, also has some pretty poor foundation. We talked about the fact that that might not be the best base, and it is pretty thin in some areas. In fact, it's inconsistent. The asphalt is like 2.5 inches, 3 inches thick
To
on one
6.
side. Yeah, to 6 inches on the other side. So it's been overlaid several times. In fact, underneath it, there's cinders, which are somewhat of an environmental issue. You remember the old tracks used to be, and I think John ran on that track. But it is something that we'd have to deal with if we were to unearth all of that and rebuild the base. So coming up with this idea to kind of raise up kills two birds with one stone. We can add some more detention to the site, also kind of level some of our track issues that we had with the inconsistencies and dimensionality there. And then also we can provide for construction stability. And that's what we've learned so far. And we did run that past one of the construction managers that you'd been talking about potentially using, and he was in agreement with that. So that's something we're going to investigate further, that concept, but that's where we're coming up with that concept of putting more gravel on top of the site and essentially building that up. We understand that it has to match up with all the grades around it and not impact anything, but Jason feels comfortable, sorry, I'm just expediting this conversation, that we could kind of alleviate that dimensional change throughout the course of the site without impacting.
Because the idea is to replace the turf, but not replace the gravel that's already there and the drain pipes that are already there. At some point, aren't we gonna wanna check those drain pipes under that gravel to make sure it's what we want and it's the width or that they are not damaged or anything? By doing that, to be able to pull back the gravel to one side, kinda like your kids are playing in the sand, they put all the sand on one side of the box and then
We can spot check. We can spot check it. We can also do
TV it.
percolation testing. Televising is not an option in this case because there's no manholes on the pipes. It's all kind of elbows and that kind of thing. But we can spot check it, and we can also do percolation tests. So basically, we just drench certain areas and watch how quickly it drains down. And then we can. There is a spot at the end where the water drains through that we can watch it.
Okay. And so, the other big question that we need answered tonight, that's resulted in some of the questions I think you've seen from the board. All of Kerry's estimates on the MOU and on the preliminary work have been based off of 7 lanes, a 7-lane track. In a worst case scenario of drainage, flooding, retention, all those kind of things. So with adding the 4 inches of stone and with the soil borings and doing the geograde and all that, is 7 lanes still an option? Are we back to just doing the current 6-lane track and just resurfacing it by building it up and then just putting a new surface on? Where are we at with that?
Well, 7 lanes is an option if you would to unearth all of the track base and go down to the cinders and mitigate the cinders issue. So we'd have to pay for disposal off-site, but that would consequently cost, $500,000 plus more dollars to do. Just because we talked about the fact that adding a 7th lane, since we were talking, the solution that we're proposing is just leaving the existing base in place and putting something on top of it. We wouldn't want to dig only 1 lane and have a new base with that, because it would provide some differential movement over the course of time. You want to create and compact that base together, and that is a recommendation from both our office, our engineer's office, and the soil technician. So if we were to do the 7th lane, we would have to kind of spend a lot more money to get. And
that's an additional $500,000 on top of the number you already put in the MOU? Or is that?
That dollar amount is included. That's why there's a cost difference between the 7 and the 6.
So if the board.
And that didn't include any environmental issues,
So that number could only go up?
Correct.
But if we stick with the current 6-lane, build it up to 4 inches and resurface it, the number in your MOU will go down.
Well, your construction manager is going to tell you what that number is going to do next. But yes, that's the concept.
That's your
estimate. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that was a big discussion to the board when we were waiting to kind of make a decision on this, so that we could start moving into the serious part of the schematic design. And hopefully after tonight, when we approve Kerry's MOU and we start to lock in the construction manager, we can really start advancing the project.
Did we talk about the soil borings, what those results were? I mean, we kept talking about getting the results for the soil borings. What did they tell us?
They did mention that there was, why don't you go ahead, Jason,
Sure.
give just a quick report of what that was.
Right. They did find some bedrock more up in the existing tennis court area, 6 feet deep, something like that. So not overly shallow, but
relatively shallow.
Is that a good thing?
No, not in general. If you need to bring pipes through there, it's very difficult to, to go through that,
If you
or
want
if,
to put underground detention,
or to put underground detention.
not a good thing either.
It's also inconsistent.
Yeah, it's on the edge. It's like 6 to 7 up here, and then it's 9 over here. It's 11 to 12 feet here, and then around in this area, it's about 10 feet deep. So,
You foresee that as a problem?
it's something to be aware of. The worst thing we could do is be surprised by that when they start digging a hole to put something in there. So, I think that we can work around that. It's
Okay.
avoid the shallow areas with deeper systems.
Is that kind of pattern typical? Why would it be spotty like that?
I'd say that that's pretty typical.
Especially
Maybe-
for an area like this, which just has a lot of bedrock, right?
Yes, right. It may vary a little bit. There is some evidence that the 6-foot level is actually, it's not bedrock, but it might be just a large stone that's at that spot, they feel. So in general, that may not even be a real bedrock value. It may be, the shallowest might be 7 feet deep, so.
Is that like from glaciers?
Yeah.
Just trying to answer Laura's
Yeah,
question.
right, yeah.
Discovery Channel.
So Laura, as they previously mentioned, the soil borings on the track show that there is a significant variation in the amount of asphalt.
Thickness, underlain by different amounts of gravel, underlain by different amounts of cinders.
So more or less, do you think they just continued to build over what was there?
Yes, yeah, adding up over the years. In addition, with the work that they're doing on First Avenue, they have some shallow bedrock over in that location. And at the zoo, with some of the work that they're doing at the southeast corner of the zoo, they had some shallow bedrock there as well, similar to the 7 to 10 foot deep levels. So it seems, for the area, it seems typical.
Well, the only reason we care how shallow the bedrock is whether we have to run a pipe through it, or put a foundation above it, or build something underground. That's gonna require us to blast it out of there or something.
Or reroute the pipe
Or
around.
reroute pipe. So did your analysis indicate there's gonna be a significant additional expense because of where the bedrock is?
Not at this point, no. I think it's not insurmountable.
All right, so we're done with the boring. Any questions on that?
So,
Is that all we got then from the boring? That's what we were looking for, was the bedrock?
Well, we talked previously about the moisture content and the
Right.
cinders and the base on all of the existing structures that are there that led to that conversation with the 4-inch rock that was being, laid on top of everything. So that was, we got cores through the track, cores through the field, cores all around where we're potentially building, and over by the parking lot area. And so, yes, it did indicate that. Anything else, Jason, you want to add?
No, just, that's it.
so that's what led Jason and Carrie's proposal of building everything up 4 to 6 inches, laying a geogrid over it, and then relaying the turf and the track over that. So that brings us still, before we move on to the village or to the stadium. I don't know how I don't know if this does not necessarily require a vote, but are we sticking then with our 6-lane track? Or,
So you have to, given the fact that you got cinder and everything else in there. I think the key thing we were talking about, so we had one issue about going bigger, adding more lane, but we also had another issue which you brought up, saying that things weren't, one was draining into the field, one wasn't doing that, where if we stay with the same amount of lanes, your geosystem will be able to pitch it the right way it's supposed to be on the track, so that we're more.
well, the biggest thing is if the soil borings came back at a point to where we had to redig up the whole track, then there was some consideration of, well, do we expand the track? But based on the analysis of the soil borings and both of your professional judgments, the entire track does not need to be dug up, correct?
Correct.
So then it's better and more cost efficient to build up the current 6-lane track and just resurface it.
Yes.
Yes.
What was the benefit of the 7th lane? What would we have gained from a 7th lane?
7 runners instead of 6, maybe more heats in a meet in less time. More kids.
It's more practice space, basically, just like on a pool, you have 7 lanes or 8 lanes instead of 6.
But it doesn't put us in a different conference, it doesn't make us more competitive.
No.
Well,
Well,
an
it
eight,
could
or
maybe-
seven and a half lane, you could hold sectional meets, you could do more things. We probably cannot hold a conference meet. We might be able to. I mean, it would have made sense if they had to dig everything up to do the 7.5, or 8, if it would fit. But since we can't, we can get by with 6, because we have,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other objections to?
And then I recall that as you went around the oval, the
Yeah, the
pitching was all
survey.
different.
Mhm.
This geo surface or whatever you're talking about, we're gonna get a uniformity to that.
And I imagine there'll be some,
Yes.
some fines that we would put on top of the
Yeah.
system.
Yes, but we'd add more in the low areas.
So we're gonna
Less.
correct some of the problems that are in there now.
Absolutely.
So who double checks that?
Yeah.
Call the
Jason?
construction manager.
I think we'll call for a survey
Yeah.
from your.
So Carrie, you'll have to go back now and redo some of your estimates and start doing some of your field drawings with 6 lanes.
We'll go ahead and do the drawings with the 6 lanes, and when we get, if you decide to move forward with your construction manager, then we'll get them involved at this point. I think if you do decide to do that, then it would be key to get them involved immediately, because time is of the essence.
So if the board approves your MOU tonight, that estimate really has no bearing because the GMP that we're gonna establish with the construction manager is what will drive
Mhm.
what your percentage is based off of.
We explained what GMP is to the people.
Guaranteed max price, but we're gonna get into that when we talk about the CM. So I just wanna make sure, because I don't want tonight when we get to the MOU part to say, well, now we're doing a 6-lane track, so doesn't this number change in Carrie's MOU? Yeah, it's, that number will change, but it's really nothing more than a placeholder.
Right, it's what we do the construction documents on, so, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we've done that, now we're gonna move to the Brookfield meeting?
Yes, well, in essence, we've kind of been covering the Brookfield meeting because these are the same conversations that we've been having with Brookfield. And I don't, is there anything that you want to add other than what we're going to talk about with this? And I'll handle that as far as
The buildings.
the buildings, yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing would be, another reason to go with the 6-lane track is they're looking at the synthetic turf field and the 6-lane track and the bleachers as existing conditions that would, are easily approved, and they wouldn't even require as much scrutiny as far as reviews if they're being
They'll still be
reconstructed.
reviewed, but yeah.
Yeah, they'll still review it.
There's no special use permit for replacing existing with,
No
right,
zoning,
updating,
and
right.
even the permitting process a little bit easier too, so.
Yeah, so when we sat down with Brookfield, they told us that this is zoned a special use area, all of it, in fact, right, Jason?
Yes.
Right.
And so they said anything that we were doing that was not replacing in kind would be held up for the zoning process and a special hearing. So anything that is that we're, any improvement that we're planning that's not already on the site and somewhat in its vicinity would be part of this zoning hearing, which is essentially a 3-month process from the time of our construction documents completion. So you can see that would, that there is, they said it's a fairly easy process, but it is something that we need to go through.
So now which means that it's only the parking lot.
Well, if we were, and I'll go through the
We already have
two.
tennis courts and they're almost in the exact same position.
We have 2 options for the site plan right now, yes, but primarily the parking lot is the issue. But since we're moving to tennis courts, then they're all part of that as well. And if we were planning on moving the track and field events from here to here, that would be part of that as well.
But that whole one parcel would be considered a special use.
So this whole one parcel would be special use in this plan. Because in this concept, you see this blue area right here? This is a concept where we put the concessions, the locker room back underneath the bleachers, okay? And that's the option that we're showing here. There's 2 options today that I'm gonna run through, and the first one is where we have the bleachers on top of the building. Not the same way you have it now, because what you have is a concrete structure, and if we get into that and decide that we'll need to do that, we'll have to allocate monies to it. Right now, I have foreseen an aluminum structure with a building, a separate building underneath. And the two structural systems are not integral. Consequently, there's some dimensional limitations for that, which I'll show you here. But that is what we're proposing, okay, with this concept. So, Mary Ann, if you want to move to the next slide, it'll
So
help.
is the concept that we want to keep it as special use, is that in our best
That's
interest,
the
working with?
Brookfield zoning, Laura, they decide, it's own special use.
It is, yeah, it's zoned special use, those are their rules. And, you know, typically the school district does not need to follow special use, special issues. For instance, last time they did this project, they didn't have to do any special hearing or permitting for this.
So as long as we keep kind of with this pattern, that we're not having to go file for
Correct.
any kind of,
Correct. Instead of having us file a special use for the parcel with the new tennis courts and parking, and a special use for a separate locker room building, now basically all this is like replacing existing, and all we have to file the special use permit for is the tennis courts and the parking.
okay.
Mary Ann, can you take the mouse up to the bar where it says view and rotate it? I don't know if this will help the board, but it helped me when I was looking at it this morning with Carrie. I don't care which way you want to flip it, counter, just keep flipping it till it's... I know it looks like I'm putting it upside down, Carrie, but... Okay, so if you're at... Carrie, if you could put the green light real quick at the bottom of the... A little more down, right there, that's your field.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'd step up the stairs to the, you know, this would be your walkway, there's your first row is your handicap seating, and then there's stairs and aisles all the way up, and the X box with the X is your press box. The ramp off to the left side is your handicap access, which is something we're lacking and out of compliance with. And then kind of like the dumbbell structure, it sticks out there and on the other side and runs underneath the back end of the bleachers. So it's not going to be, you know, where it's below ground like it is now and all the water drains and floods it, or we're losing storage space. It's just going to be a narrow building underneath, which is what's on top.
Right, so that is exactly what we're doing. We're putting it underneath, pretty much in the same position that it is now, except the building is much different in the fact that it's not as tall, it's not made out of concrete, at least at this point. And then we've got a garage for storage over on this side, locker rooms each side, a training area in the center, coach's office, shower area, student locker room toilet areas, and then over on the far right is a concession stand and a storage.
Public restrooms.
A storage and public restrooms. And that would all be on the home side.
There's showers for men and women?
Yes. There's a shower here,
I
a shower
see.
here. Yeah. We've minimized those because they don't use them as much, but we didn't want to eliminate the total function.
But
So if I'm in the area underneath the stadium, how do I exit out of that? So if I'm in the training room, how do I go to the field?
If you are in the training room, you would come out and go out this door.
So I'd go out into...
Walk
towards-
around.
all
Okay, you
right,
gotta go all the way
okay.
Where's the property line, though?
out. The property.
This is on the site plan. We didn't put that on the site
It's
plan.
the property line's about right here.
So there'll be a gap, because right now the stadium is right on the property line.
Right, we're
correct?
gonna hold a gap.
We'll hold a gap for a walkway.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then given this type of scenario versus the separate structure scenario, cost differential same, different, higher, lower?
Well, I mean, there's gonna be some savings here because we're gonna keep it all together as opposed to building two individual buildings. So there'll be some offset here. There'll also be some savings because we wouldn't be providing detention for this little building. And in another scenario that I'll show you, the Brookfield is requiring that we provide detention for that standalone building. And that, so this is a solution that I think is probably comparable, even though you might get a little more square footage over here.
How high is so where the bottom of the bleachers are, to where the first seats are, similar to us or a little bit lower?
No, these are lower. It's probably about, 30 inches or so above the ground, that walkway.
Okay.
We can make it as high as we want. The only thing that happens is it extends this ramp further. We do anywhere between 30 and 4 feet. We can make it, and it's really just kind of what's the limit of your ramp.
And the structural beams that would be in the back of these bleachers, so at the west side of the bleachers, they go through the locker room, right?
No, they would not.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you. If you want to go to the next one, Marianne.
Before you go to that one, if you don't mind, is that okay? Can you hold
Yeah,
that?
go back.
You're going to have to turn that upside down.
This design is different in other ways though, too, right? We didn't have a bay for parking vehicles or whatever it is.
It's not
Not a
really for
bay.
parking vehicles, it's for storage.
But I mean, that wasn't on the other design, was it?
No,
part of this?
no, we were pretty much cutting off the storage, which was already in place we had eliminated it just to
We
prevent
were
us
examining,
from.
remember, if we did the standalone option, we were examining putting those possible trailer canisters or some type of canisters under the bleachers. So now that we're using that space under the bleachers for some of the locker room, we could basically put these 3 bays. So those would be small, like 6-foot garage doors, that one would be for track and the hurdles and the mats.
I'm just trying to get the taste for what's different. It just wasn't changing.
It took the,
Design, the footprint, are the locker rooms and the rest of it pretty much similar to what we saw before?
Yes.
yeah, basically, we took the concession stand off that auto shop and took the restrooms and the concession stand and attached it to the locker rooms to offset the space we're using on the other side for the storage base.
Okay. And then the other thing, and I'm sure Joel and everybody here working, is it, the way that's designed, the locker rooms, like coaches' offices are inside the area where the locker rooms are? It looks
Mhm.
like. I mean, what if, are
Yeah,
there
there's-
coaches' office on both
there's a
sides? I
coach's
mean, there's
office on- yes, there
so you
is.
could have females on one side
Yes.
and males on the other?
Yeah, that's what it's labeled, men's
Okay.
and women's,
So there's a coach office on each side, a shower on each side, a restroom on each side.
Okay.
One side's women's, one side's men. In the fall, we use it by all men use both sides. And then in the spring, there's a women's side for girls track and girls soccer, and then the boys track uses the boys side.
And is the height, how does the height compare to what we have now, Gary?
This would be much shorter than what you have currently because you have
We go all the way to the top.
But you also, is it still gonna seat 2,000?
we're looking at, I believe, 1,800 right now.
Well, right now, it's like 13 or so.
It's
somewhere.
15, almost 16 right now.
Oh.
Yeah, it's closer to 17.
Right,
You
closer
mean
to
our
seven.
Shoei Stadium?
And
Yeah.
then, yes, and
It's
then,
closer to 17.
and
Not-
then
not
on the
by
other
my
side,
counts.
there's more occupants on the other side.
Okay.
So we are remaining in kind, just
Right, we're
like.
replacing existing with existing.
Got it.
Okay.
Before you leave this page.
Is there,
Hold on.
is there going to be additional cost because we're building under currently a recessed facility? To build that back up, to build the mechanicals back up, or do you anticipate that we can
Oh, you mean-
leverage up?
Because because it's.
Right, and we had the plumbing down lower and all that?
No, because really what you would excavate for that anyway, when you would put a new building pad in, you would do that, you would build that up with the kind of gravel that you would want, and the base that you would want, and the foundation that you would want. And we're obviously going to be needing footings for the work that we're doing, so it just won't be like a garage slab with a turned edge, it will be a full footing.
Okay, Mike, you had a question?
As we look at this, west is to the top and east is to the bottom. And the question was, if one of the athletes is in the coaches or the trainer's room in the middle, could they then go down the long hallway, north or south, and then exit to the east side of that building?
Yes, right there.
So I think before we said that they would exit to the back and walk around the.
Yeah, either way, we have to have two exits.
Two exits,
You're
yeah.
absolutely right.
Okay, so I just,
The reason the trainer's office
was
is in the
asking
middle
this.
and there's a door, Carrie, if you could put the green light on that,
yeah.
is right now, sometimes in the spring, it's not as user-friendly for both boys and girls. And now with this setup, There's doors that close off each side of the locker room, so if you had to go see a trainer, you had to walk down a hallway, go into the training room, come back down the hallway to go to the locker room. Where the current setup, you'll be seeing into the other locker room. So
our
this is an,
sightline
this is an
all then-
sightline improvement.
Well, yes, absolutely. You know,
Privacy
and we'll get into those more as we move forward, but yes.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
Whoa, Matt.
What?
How's the capacity of the lockers? Are we shortchanging anything?
No.
No.
Your
No, we-
coaches are completely happy, you're happy?
All right, so we did a wish list with all the coaches, we did like a necessity, yeah, we're ahead of you on that. And then we took pictures of the current lockers and the depth, the width, the height, and the new stalls and stuff will be the same, if not more.
It's just a really quick schematic, just to show you, how this relationship would be to this is called a section through, if you were to cut the building in half, right in the middle. And so you can see this is where the locker room and that kind of like corridor between the lockers and that they would walk to get out, remember we just talked about. And so you can see that this is the structure. We are not looking at utilizing the structure to come down in through this building right now. And the reason being is because then obviously you put penetrations in it, there's water infiltration and so forth. If you wanted something like that, these would pretty much have to be concrete stringers and beams, which is what you have currently.
Right, we don't want that.
And then you could occupy this entire. But if you look, you really are encroaching, even if we got into this next bay, we still would be hitting some head height issues here. So this is kind of occupiable space right now. We would probably take as much area possible. And this has not been designed, it's just conceptual, but it would show you, how far. Really, this distance here is about, I think, 16 or 17 feet wide. It's not very wide. And it's intentionally because we're trying to fit in between that space to keep it economical.
So majority of the locker room will sit out probably on the dumbbell side of each of it.
Yes.
So most of the stuff that will be underneath will be the coach's office, the showers, the training room,
And the
hallway.
lockers, because the thin.
some of the lockers.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
So,
right, any questions on this? All right, what else do you have for us?
and the next one is the other option that shows that what we've seen previously with that building a little closer over here to the street, and then that one that came off of there. Now this is.
Are we still doing the concession area there?
No.
In this concept, yes, here, we would
But
keep,
if we do the other one,
the concession would not be here, it would be in this corner.
No, if we did the other one, the concession's
Part of the
connected
dumbbell.
to the dumbbell under the
Right.
grandstand.
There is no other building, it's
The
just one.
north dumbbell.
That's correct.
And one of the benefits that Joe and I looked at with Carrie, now that we're having the 6-lane track, and if we eliminate the concession stand and do the dumbbell type design under the bleachers, is this would allow us to possibly put a perimeter fence around the outside of our track on areas that aren't by the bleachers, which would eliminate all those hurdles and caution tape and flags and things you see and people going up over and under, and it would allow us to provide some more security from the field to the track during events and some of those things. Eliminate some of the tightness.
all right, anything else that you need to discuss?
And you're saying in this drawing, you're saying that Brookfield would require a retention pond?
For this building only,
Right.
and
Special use and.
a
retention.
special use permit and zoning hearing related to this building. Therefore, they would be reviewing aesthetics of the building, they would be reviewing anything associated with it, and that would be on the table for discussion at that hearing. They didn't see a particular issue with it, other than it would just have to be part of the process because it's not directly located underneath here. However, that's where we learned that if we were to locate that building underneath there, like it is now, then that wouldn't be the case.
Right.
All right,
So the intent would be, although she's given us 2 options, one of the questions that have come up with the board is that once the fall seasons are all complete, if there's some break in weather, and once everybody's on board with the CM and is there room to do some of the demo before the March 1st? We're looking March 1st to August 1st. If we do choice A, which is the dumbbell version under the bleachers, pretty much everything east of the tennis courts and parking is replacement old with new, and does not require special use, and would allow us to maybe start doing some of that demo, start pulling back the turf, start looking at some of the drainage, and give us more months or more time to work. Whereas if we go with choice B, which is the separate building and the separate concession stand, now we kind of hold our breath and hope everything goes through, and then we can get it all done in the 6 months window we're looking at. Is that close? Is that accurate, Carrie?
That's correct.
I gotta tell you, I like the aesthetics of the going over there better.
I do too.
Instead of putting 2 more buildings out there, people are just gonna look at it, we're putting 2 more. And I don't see a good reason to go with this option. And if I'm missing something, speak now.
Well, also, if you would go to the next one. Yeah, so this is that building. The reason is that this is a more functional approach to building as far as the width to, ratio. And it makes it a little bit more, instead of a single loaded corridor, it's more efficient. If you go to the next one, Marianne. This, we're able to tack on to the existing auto shop. We can take some utilities from there. The unfortunate part about this is that we'd like to put a fence around the track to, that's pretty typical in high school construction right now. And we would create a pinch point here. And so then with the traffic coming from the home bleachers, which would be over here, trying to get to the concessions and the washroom, I feel like we create kind of a...
What I don't like about that is, right now, football games are a social event, and there's kids using that corner. And you're taking away a lot of footprint space for those kids to be running around and socializing.
Sure.
Especially if you put the
Concessions.
fence around it too,
Yeah.
Gary. You almost have to have that.
Well, Jason would be elated today if we could leave here and understand that we would be going in a certain direction, because that is something that we need to start doing our calculations for stormwater detention. And they've
All
been
right, so let's do
hounding us
this.
for weeks.
Does anybody have an objection to move to doing the locker room underneath the bleachers like Kerry has proposed today?
I don't know if I don't know if that's...
I'm ready. We're ready with that. Where Joel and I will get more involved with the athletic director and the coaches is, does the door turn this way, does the door turn that way? Should the storage bays be on the north side or the south side?
Right,
The
those
sooner we
things.
can get a decision like we did tonight with the track, 6 lanes, the sooner we can say, hey, there's where we're going. The sooner I start really digging into the project with Carrie,
Does
eventually
anybody have a...
My only question is, 17 feet seems really narrow to me. And I don't, is it comfortable that that space is gonna be comfortable for our people? And will be able to be used?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty, if you were to look back at the, go
17
back to
feet
the
get out
previous
to the
one.
edge.
Yeah, right, to the dumbbells.
So if you look here, that's that same distance.
Okay, good.
It's just that it doesn't have, another side to that
Right.
corridor.
So instead of walking
That's what
across.
the dumbbells are for.
Right.
I think from the concession stand being placed in the corner, I think it'd be very inconvenient for certain people to make the walk, so I think keeping it on...
Keeps it one area where everybody's at.
Yeah.
All right, does
I'm all
anybody
for
have any
that.
objections to this?
No.
I'd say we move to the building under the bleachers.
Yep.
All right, seeing no objection to it,
Can I add one thing as we move forward?
we cannot put a board press box up there, please.
No track on top of the.
No. My point is, you said the height could be 30 versus up to 4 feet, talking about...
Sure,
Right, I
where
want
we
to make
start the
sure
height.
that the, those are mostly handicapped spaces, that sight line is completely reasonable, and if it's going to cost us more to go up a little higher, we should make that calculation.
For the front row.
Yeah.
Carrie, go to, Mary Ann, go to page 2. Right there. So even though it's upside down where the handicap chairs are, It's basically, that's the field, looking onto the field, so you're saying raise the front row up so that someone that's sitting in their first row bleachers or is handicapped in a wheelchair, their sight line isn't into the back of the people on the field.
Yeah, I
They can
wanna make
see-
sure that
At least
it-
see over them and see the field.
Yeah, right, the standard, you know.
Okay, I have no problem with
Yeah, I think that's good.
That's
that.
smart.
That's a good idea. All right, so you have your directions on it?
Yes.
So we're going with the dumbbell under, and we're going with the dumbbell format, and we're going with the 6-lane track.
Do we need to vote for that, or no? Do we just need
It's
to?
in record and it's on, you
Okay.
know what I mean, so. When they come to us for the final drawings, we're gonna have to approve it anyway, right?
Yes.
Yep.
But we're saying directionally, this is where we want you to start designing, so. Okay, so are we done with, Carrie, are we done with all your subjects, matters?
Is that all the topics? Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you very
Jason.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
So, Carrie, are you gonna stay around for?
She's not.
No, okay. All right, thank you very much, appreciate it. And as always, as the MWRD says, there will be no impact on neighbors on the flooding.